Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Councilmember Jamie Gaudier as she walks us through the new housing legislation she introduced in council last week. Vanessa Maria Graber will report live from the scene of last week's tragic plane crash. And Lance Haver will discuss the recent actions of the Trump administration. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, just another day.
Well, I was saying to someone earlier, I'm having trouble with what week this is of the Trump administration because it's all starting to blend into one horrible, terrible mishmash.
Yes.
And with the latest being, we're basically going to annex the Gaza Strip.
Yeah,
and, for somebody who a lot of people voted for because they said, "Oh, he'll keep us out of wars." So far he has picked a fight with Mexico.
Yes.
Greenland.
Yes.
The Canada.
Yes.
And just all. It's a hot mess.
Yeah. No. We're all over the place, and we're only a couple weeks in.
Mm-hmm.
Only like 200 more weeks of this.
So. Or as I said to someone, we now have 3 months and 3 years and now 10 months of this to endure.
Yeah, that's where we are. So we'll start with some good news. Our interview with Councilmember Gaudier, where she talks about some of this housing legislation that could be really beneficial to the city. So here's our interview with Councilmember Jamie Gaudier. All right, Councilmember Jamie Gaudier, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So last week, you introduced a couple pieces of legislation that's a continuation of the work you've been doing for a while now. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what are kind of the nuts and bolts we're talking about here?
Sure. So last week, I was excited to introduce phase 2 of my Defying Displacement campaign. You might remember that last year, I originally launched this campaign. The first phase of it included several bills. We created the new low-income property tax freeze program. We cracked down on Section 8 voucher discrimination. And we also mandated that funds that developers send to the city through the density bonus program to build affordable housing has to go to the actual housing trust fund. So this next phase of the Defying Displacement campaign is all about cutting red tape to make sure that we can produce and develop more affordable housing. So there are several pieces of legislation that go with that. First, we want to make sure that we can get zoning permits for affordable housing projects faster. So we want there to be a 5-day turnaround from the Department of Licenses and Inspection for affordable housing projects in particular. We want to allow affordable housing projects to be able to get an accelerated hearing at ZBA. And we want to make sure that we can codify or document commitments that developers are making around affordable housing to registered community organizations and ZBA. So lots of times we'll see developers come forward and they'll get approvals for their projects largely because they're promising affordable units. But, most times that's like a handshake, right? We want to be able to, actually give an approval based on an affordable housing commitment explicitly. And we want that to be documented in a proviso or a deed restriction so that we can hold developers accountable for developing what they said they would do to benefit our community. And so this whole first section of bills is about preferencing affordable housing projects because they are so critically needed in our city. We know that we are in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. At our current pace, it would take us about 2 centuries to develop the amount of affordable housing we actually need. At the same time, Mayor Parker has pledged to deliver a plan to develop 30,000 housing units in the city of Philadelphia over the next 3 to 4 4 years, I think my bills are a complement to that. If we are really going to build 30,000 units, we're going to have affordable housing projects move through our system in a way that's faster, more efficient, and cheaper. And that's what this first set of bills will do. The next part of our second phase of defying displacement is around what I call bonus units. We want to allow people to create bonus units. Some people call them accessory dwelling units by right in the council districts where they are allowed, because we think that bonus units are a great tool to help our homeowners age in place, or to help homeowners to afford their housing costs in a better way than they can currently. So for instance, if you imagine I'm an elderly person, I've been living in my home for some time. I live in a huge home in, I don't know, Walnut Hill or East Parkside, and it's too much house for me because currently I live by myself. I could create a bonus unit that I could move into. It doesn't change anything about the outward appearance of my house, but it allows me to have a unit that's more fitted for me inside my house, and my adult children can move into the rest of the house, maybe with their children, right? So that allows me to age in place in my community and also get some support from my family. Or, I own a big house in West Philadelphia or Southwest, and I'm having a lot of trouble paying my bills and taking care of my expenses. I can create a bonus unit, which is an income earning opportunity for me, and also an affordable housing opportunity for someone else in the community. Now, currently, there are 4 council districts where bonus units or accessory dwelling units are allowed, but you have to go through the zoning process. And for the typical homeowner, the zoning process is complicated, it's lengthy, it's expensive, and that's an incredible barrier to me creating a bonus unit in my home. So much so that with the current laws, we've only had 10 bonus units developed in the past 10 years. We want to allow everyday homeowners to get in on the game of creating affordable housing in a way that's really easy, right? And that's also a way that helps us to get to our goal of 30,000 housing units over the next 4 years or so. So that's what this next phase of defying displacement is all about: cutting the red tape, making it easier to develop affordable housing, and putting, our laws where our mouth is, right? We say that we want affordable housing. We have to make sure that we're preferencing affordable housing and making it easier for developers and homeowners and just regular people to deliver it to our communities.
And one of the things that you mentioned there that this legislation is going to do is sort of mandates when a developer says, well, we're going to do X amount of affordable housing. It has to stick now, because in the past, they could say something like, well, cost overruns or something, or they would just, I had people say to me, we just didn't do it. You promised you. So now it's nice to see that they're going to be held accountable for this, which they hadn't been before.
Absolutely. 2 things we're trying to do with this particular law. One, affordability, housing affordability is not really a part of the criteria for a zoning variance, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of times that's why community members are agreeing to the variance. We want to make it part of the criteria that, you can get a positive zoning decision because you're offering something that's beneficial to the community. However, on the other side, we want to hold you accountable for actually delivering that. So I think this is a win-win.
Yeah. And you did talk about this a little bit, but I just want to reemphasize it a little. What does this mean for people with lower incomes who are looking to say, okay, now it's time, we want to buy a house, we have an expanding family. How can they look at this and say, okay, this is good for me?
They can look at this as our city doing what is in our control to bring more, to make it easier to develop affordable housing in Philadelphia. We can't control a lot of things. We can't control construction cost, for instance, but we can control our laws, our processes, and cut down on the amount of bureaucracy that's involved with the development of affordable housing. I certainly don't want to be the one to have to go back to my constituents and say, The reason why we don't have enough affordable housing is because we just have too much bureaucracy in the city of Philadelphia. So that's what this is all about. And then the second piece is almost like democratizing development, right? Why should big developers be the only ones able to build generational wealth off of development, right? I can develop this bonus unit that doesn't change the exterior of my property in a way that's going to sort of rattle my neighbors, but does allow me to have an income opportunity, income earning opportunity, and contribute to the amount of affordable housing in our city. So this is making it easier for developers and homeowners alike to add to Philadelphia's supply of affordable housing.
And we definitely need that. So, I know this is a really busy time, not just because it's generally a busy time, the spring. Well, with everything else that's going on, it's been even busier and more fraught, maybe I'll say. I know we're a little early to talk about this, and I know council members really don't have everything sorted out yet for what they'd like to see in the upcoming budget because it hasn't been presented yet. But what are just a couple, generally speaking, maybe a couple things you're keeping an eye on, or generally, what would you like to see?
Sure, I'll give you sort of three buckets. First, words cannot adequately describe how troubled I am about what's coming down from the White House as it relates to immigration, as it relates to the criminalization of immigrants in our country, as it relates to xenophobia. And, I think we have to stand up for our immigrant neighbors, and we have to stand firm that we are not going to allow hardworking members of hardworking contributors to our city to be just terrorized by the federal government, whether it's President Trump or anybody else. And so one thing I think we have to invest in this budget season is pro bono legal defense. We recently had a hearing that was hosted by Councilmember Rue Landau. We heard from the Defenders Association about how ready they are to stand up for people, to make sure that people know their rights, to make sure that they have legal protections, and they're going to do that through an expansion of pro bono legal defense for immigrants in our city specifically. I think it is urgent that City Council fully fund that operation. So that's going to be something that I push for in the city budget and hope to have the support of all my colleagues. You can always count on me to push for funds for affordable housing in the city budget. That's not going to change this year. We are always fighting for more funding for what I call preservation, the preservation of affordable housing. Lots of folks will remember the UC Townhome saga, right? And how we had this low-income housing development that was backed by a time-limited subsidy, but when that subsidy expired, the owner just wanted to basically kick those tenants out on the street. UC Townhomes was a very high-profile example of that, but we have thousands of these types of housing units that are backed by time-limited subsidies, and we need money to actually help affordable housing providers acquire those housing units before they expire so that we can keep them in service as affordable housing. That's a big priority of mine. I'm always fighting for more rental assistance funds. On a monthly basis, the third district alone has a $16 million rental gap. That's the difference between what people are earning and what their actual rent is, right? And to the extent that we can give people even small amounts of money to keep them in their homes, that keeps them out of the homeless serving system, that keeps them off of the street, that keeps them in their homes where they can be healthy and safe. That's very important. And the rental gap on a citywide basis is $900 million annually. So this is a big problem in the city, but when we have rental assistance funds, we're able to keep a lot more people in their housing units. And I'm also very focused on youth criminal justice. I have the Juvenile Justice Services Center in my district. We've been, the Inquirer, for instance, has been doing a lot of great reporting about not only the conditions at the site, but also how much we detain young people, more than a lot of other places in the country. And so what I'm focused on is, one, making sure that the young people in that facility are being treated fairly, educated fairly, and supported, but also that we are able to have good oversight. So my office has been a great supporter of our youth ombuds, and we want to make sure that that office has as many resources as it needs to give great oversight to a facility where our precious young people are detained, right? And then we also want to see more funding go towards diversion, because detention of a young person, imprisonment of a young person should be the last option. We need to invest in resources within our communities to make sure that young people are able to grow, that they are able to connect to opportunity, and that they're not just doomed to a particular way of life because they made a mistake or had a bad day. So those are some of the things that I'm pretty focused on, but I'm also working with my team to sort of refine our list for budget.
And I'm going to editorialize a little bit because I can.
Yeah.
That hearing that Councilmember Landau held, and you participated a lot in that hearing, was really important just for people to see, hey, somebody in government here is trying to at least tell you what we're looking at, and I think that was crucial. And I think all the things you've talked about really touch on that too, because these are the things people want to hear about. So what I'm going to do now is throw it over to Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Thank you, Council
Hi,
Member, for
Denise.
joining us. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
My question, and it kind of bounces back to what you were talking about in terms of affordable housing. One of the problems that we've always had with affordable housing in this city is no one can define it. It's kind of like obscenity with the Supreme Court. I can't define it, but I'll know what it is when I see it. What is affordable? If I'm looking for affordable housing in Philadelphia, what do I have to do to know that I have access to affordable housing?
So the reason why I think it's so hard to define is because it has to be affordable to you, right? There's no sort of one answer. It has to be affordable to the particular person. The generally accepted definition for what is affordable is housing for which you're not spending more than 30% of your income on whatever your income is, right? That's like the generally accepted principle. But many people in Philadelphia spend way more than 30% of their income on their housing costs, which means you're cost burdened. Affordable housing, and when we're talking about specific rents or housing prices, it is mostly marked by an index called AMI, or Area Median Income. Those definitions come down from the federal government, and most localities follow AMI because the federal government is the largest funder of affordable housing. So their funding drives what is sort of defined as affordable housing. AMI, or Area Median Income, is a pretty broad scale. In the Philadelphia region, AMI also includes the Collar counties, so it can be quite high. So for instance, 100% of area median income for a four-person family in the Philadelphia region, I believe, is about $112,000. But most Philadelphians make nowhere near that, right? And so when we're talking about what the average Philadelphian can afford, it's generally at a much lower level on the AMI scale. When I first came into office, I did a study on the affordable housing in the 3rd district. And what I found was that the average person in the 3rd district is at about 34% of AMI. So think about that 100% number and think about the 34% number where, you know, the average person in my district is. And so when developers are coming to me to pitch affordable housing projects, and they're coming to me to do a project at 80% or 100% or 120% of AMI, I'm constantly pushing them lower and lower and lower down that scale because I know that's what my people can afford.
Now, with the changes going on in Washington and anymore, you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh God, what am I going to do? Affordable, you made the point that affordable, a lot of the money for affordable housing comes
Yeah,
from the federal government. Are you
yeah,
concerned about what
yes,
that means for Philadelphia?
100%. When last week, when Trump issued an executive order in a memo saying that he was essentially shutting off all federal grants and loans, I was terrified. That would have been disastrous for our city. It would have been disastrous for our city government, our state government, nonprofits across the city and state that are providing vital social services to people all over the city and state, to our hospitals, to our research institutions, and housing would have definitely been impacted. Just to give you a small slice of how important federal support is to affordable housing here in Philadelphia, a lot of people know that the West Park housing development is getting renovated, for instance. That is one of the last high-rise public housing towers in Philadelphia. It is badly, badly, badly in need of renovation. We have a plan that's underway to renovate the entire site. It's going to be beautiful. Not only are we going to replace all 327 public housing units, we're going to add almost 700 more housing units, the majority of which will also be affordable. The federal government gave us a grant for $21 million that is going into that project. If you look further in Southwest Philadelphia at Bartram's Village, another public housing development that is badly in need of renovation, the Biden administration gave us $50 million to go into a beautiful renovation of that site, right? These funds are going to help us secure affordable housing, quality affordable housing for decades to come in areas that, to be frank, are gentrifying. So we have to put a stake in the ground and make sure that working class families can continue to live in these areas as they change. Trump's executive order would have cut all of that. And you know, I'm not even talking about the millions of other dollars that go into transit and our street infrastructure. It just would have been a disastrous situation. And so, yes, I'm incredibly worried about the president's lack of care for communities like ours, and what that will mean for us. But I'm also even more determined that we have to do more to shore up these dollars locally and at the state level, in case we're in a situation where we have to depend on ourselves because we have a president that we cannot depend on.
Okay. Over the weekend, a group of young people, including a Temple University student, they were on campus impersonating in immigration and customs enforcement agents. And they went to a business on Cecil B. Moore Avenue, tried to get into one of the dorms at Temple, and they were, saying they were ICE agents. Now, most of Philadelphia's universities have large international contingents, and you have two of those universities, Drexel and Penn, in your district. In light of this, have you talked to the folks in security or the presidents of these of Penn and Drexel to kind of give them a heads up and to say, okay, what are you going to do about this? What do you need from me?
I do believe that we sent the information over to them when we heard about the Temple situation, but I haven't had an explicit conversation with them as of yet. But we are in communication with Penn about a lot of other things that are related to some of what we've seen coming down from the White House.
Okay. Do you think that, because like I said, Philadelphia has a lot of international students that come here. Do you think that the fact that Philadelphia appears to be one of the places that's being targeted by immigration and customs enforcement, well, do you think that'll make people rethink whether or not they come here to go to school? And if so, how does that affect those universities? Because that's probably a nice chunk of their budget.
I hope not. And I hope that that doesn't impact people's decision to come here and study. But it's also more of a reason for every public official and community member to affirm that we are a welcoming city, we are a sanctuary city, and we're not going to stand for this foolishness. We're just not. This is the time to really stand on that point. And it's about students, but it's also about our broader community. I represent a district that where thousands of immigrants live, students and adults, right? People from various parts of Africa, people from Bangladesh, many African and Caribbean and Asian people who've immigrated from their countries are proud to call the third district their home. My own mother immigrated to Southwest Philadelphia from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I would not be me if that hadn't happened, right? And so I am very firm on the point that we're not going to stand for this. We're going to make sure that people know their rights. We're going to make sure that we stand with our immigrant neighbors, and we're going to affirm that we as a city welcome immigrants, students, adults, all of the above.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And Councilmember Gaudier, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to talk with y'all.
All right. We'd like to thank Councilmember Jamie Gaudier for joining us on the program. I just want to mention, because this came out from Councilmember's office today, the deadline for the low-income property tax freeze has been extended to February 28th. I want to make sure people know that the deadline for the low-income property tax freeze has been extended to February 28th. We will put information about that in our newsletter and how to find that information. So you'll have that this weekend from us, and you can find it on the city's website, but that's good news. Now, what I'd like to do is bring on Vanessa Maria Graber. See if we can get Vanessa on here. Vanessa, how are you tonight?
Hey, I'm fine, thank you.
So tell us where you are right now.
I am in Northeast Philadelphia at the corner of Cottman and Bustleton Avenue, at the scene of a vigil that's being held tonight for the victims of the plane crash that happened last Friday. And so down the street, it is still blocked off on Cottman Avenue. That is the scene of where the crash occurred. On Cottman and Rupert Streets, and so over here on Bustleton Avenue. I'm gonna pan the camera a little bit so you can see.
Now, Vanessa, last week you were one of the first reporters on the scene.
I actually was not on the scene, and that was largely due to the high levels of toxic smoke and fumes that were being emitted. But I was one of the first people to start reporting on it and gathering videos from social media and start talking to other reporters to kind of piece together what happened. So I have been tracking this story. Right here, a vigil is being organized by a Mexican artist, and he came from Washington, D.C., where he did the same vigil on the riverbank of the Potomac for the victims of the United Airways and Black Hawk helicopter crash, which occurred a week ago. And so now he's come to Philadelphia to gather people to do the same. And so in the background, you can kind of see over here, there is a mural, which he is working on, which will stay behind. And he's asked people to bring flowers and candles. So people are holding candles here, and there's a lot of flowers down where the mural is. And they are saying the rosary right now. Most of the people here are Latino, and that's because 6 of the passengers that were on the Learjet 55 flight were from Mexico. And so there's an incredible outpouring of support from the Latino community here in Philadelphia. that's not only praying for the victims in the plane crash, but the victims on the ground, one of whom died, who was driving on Cottman Avenue, and 24 others who were also victims. Several of them are still hospitalized, with one or two in critical condition. So there's an effort here to pray for those individuals, and of course the hundreds of people that were impacted by this crash who either witnessed it or live in the surrounding area.
Now, I understand that Roosevelt Mall has reopened. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's correct. All of the stores around here have reopened. It was kind of a gradual process. A lot of employees left the scene immediately, leaving things behind. And so at first they were letting employees come back through special entrances, but now it's fully reopened. So this whole area at Cottman and Busselton, which is a very, very busy intersection, has now reopened. Although the scene is still rather somber. Again, not even a week ago, this was the scene of a catastrophic plane crash. And then, if you can imagine, this whole area here, people were running around in sheer panic as they saw nearly a city block be engulfed in flames from the impact of the crash.
It does seem like there are a lot of people there tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's probably around 100, 150 people here at 7 p.m. at nearby Solace Cohen Elementary School. The mayor and the administration are holding a community meeting. So I imagine that a lot of people are going to be there. There was more than 350 homes that were impacted by this. And so the city is holding a meeting to talk about resources and next steps as they continue with the transportation and this intergovernmental effort between the Department of Transportation, the FAA, the National Transportation Safety Board, and also the governor and PennDOT.
Now, is there any, and are you hearing anything about any of those resources? What may be available to people and how soon it will be?
So the first thing that they did was open up a shelter, which they did at Fells High School. They're working with the American Red Cross as well to provide resources for the families that have been displaced. Of course, several families' homes were completely destroyed. Other people lost their vehicles, which they need for work. Many folks are, quite frankly, they're mentally traumatized. And so the city is also offering a crisis helpline and mental health through the Department of Behavioral Services. And so those are being offered to people immediately. It's not clear what's going to be offered. I guess that's what's the meeting about. And so we'll find out. But there is a flyer that we can be sharing on the Hall on our social media that gives the immediate resources and next steps for people impacted by this crash.
Okay.
Now, as you said, most of the victims on the plane were Mexican immigrants, or coming here to the United States for medical treatment on their way home. And now the vigil is being organized by the Latino community. Is there a way, does that tie into maybe some of the things we're seeing at the national level about, this rhetoric we're hearing and all the negativity we're seeing?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. Last week, there was a lot of false reports of ICE raids and threats of deportation. And as a result, many members of this community went underground. They were not going to work. They were not sending their children to school. And they were staying indoors. And part of the impact of disinformation like this is it creates a sense of panic and fear in the community. And right here in this neighborhood, in this area, there was a false claim that a major ICE operation was happening, complete with infrared lasers and drones. That was actually not true. It was a Facebook post that somebody screenshotted from other cities. So that the same post was distributed in Chicago and Massachusetts, and they simply changed the street names to match Philadelphia. And so they said that it was happening at Cotman and the Boulevard, which is right down the street. And so many residents of this area were completely terrified. And as journalists, we helped clarify that this was disinformation and this was not happening. But this disinfo was so widely spread that it caused many people, like I said, to be very afraid and not to leave. So the very fact that there's that many people here is a testament to how much this has touched people and how much they wanted to show respect and care for the families of the people involved. Of course, we also know that there was an ICE raid at a car wash in the Juniata Hunting Park area of the city, where the ICE did detain 7 individuals. And so that has also created a lot of panic and fear. ICE also came to a Puerto Rican restaurant, Boricua restaurant in the Port Richmond neighborhood. And so these threats are still very real. And I think that's also adding to the somber mood around here. And really, it's a lot for the community to be dealing with. And especially with so much police and federal agents present, it does create a sense of fear. And so I suspect the crowds would have been much larger if we weren't operating within the current context.
I'd like to talk about that for a second. You know, we've all seen a lot of things shared on social media talking about ICE raids and all that kind of thing. What should people do if they see something on social media? How can they verify it's accurate? What would you recommend for people?
So there are several things that people should do. Obviously, if they see a post and it's like ICE is at Sam's Club, which is the post that, was going around last week. And so we asked the people, do you have a photo? Do you have a video? Is this a first person testimony? So we try to go directly to the person who posted the information to find out what they know. If they said that they are just reposting it and they don't have any information, then you probably shouldn't repost it until you verify. If they're saying, oh, my friend is over there and they told me, well, then we ask them, can your friend take a picture? Can your friend shoot some video? Can your friend get in the phone and give us more information? And so, we try to get primary source verification before we spread it and tell people. And when that's not present, we do not share the information. Now, people can always come to us, right? There is a group of journalists in the Latinx media. We're working together to try to verify these things. And people have been sending us graphics, flyers, news reports, all sorts of things, and asking us to verify, which we do our very best to collaborate and try to get to the bottom of these things. And 9 times out of 10, the reports are false. So I think people have to really do their due diligence. Now, sometimes there are photos, but they're blurry, they're from far away, the angles are hard to read. So even with photos and video, we have to carefully examine them. Sometimes there are police there, but they might be Philadelphia police, they might be the DEA, they might be SWAT team, they might be sheriffs carrying out an eviction. And so there's a number of different scenarios that could be taking place that is not an ICE raid. And so we try to look into all of those possibilities before sending an alert out into the community. Now, when that car wash raid happened, there were several videos where you could clearly see that there were ICE agents and they were detaining people. Sometimes ICE is just around and they're allowed to patrol, I guess. That doesn't necessarily mean they're arresting or detaining anybody. And so when we saw people being led away in handcuffs and we could see the location and people were still there filming and doing lives, we knew that that was a real case of ICE coming to detain people in our city.
Wow. So has there been any new information from the Department of Transportation in terms of what happened with this crash? Are they still looking for the voice recorder?
Yeah, they have identified the black box. There's actually a crater right down the street. It's about 8 feet deep. And so they looked in that crater and they were able to find the black box. I don't believe they found the cockpit voice recorder yet. And so they've been asking people all around Northeast Philadelphia to check in their yards, to check around and see if there's any pieces. The plane was in the air from the Northeast Philadelphia airport less than a minute before it crashed. It's about 3 to 4 miles away from this location. And it's not clear if the plane started to lose wreckage while we're in the air, or if all the wreckage kind of exploded on site. And so they are looking at a 3 to 4 mile area around here to look for wreckage parts. The mayor and the NTSB director have said if you see something, to call 911 or to email witness@ntsb.gov. So an agent can come and collect the item. They don't want people to handle it at all. And right now, they're literally dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of debris that have been scattered about this 4 to 6 block area.
Okay, and that's witness@ntsb.gov?
That's correct.
Okay.
So we're closely following this. Of course, this is a developing investigation. We still don't know the cause yet. If you look at some of the video that's been shared, you can see that it was a fireball, right, of the plane descending, nosediving right behind us, and then crashing right there on Cotman Avenue. And so, again, aviation experts, who have been interviewed are speculating that something happened while in the air that caused the plane to nosedive and then crash. And so that is what they're trying to determine: what exactly happened to that plane, what exactly, if there was a mechanical failure or fire that then caused the plane to, lose control and descend into a residential neighborhood. Now, I want to give a fact, because I grew up in this neighborhood. I am from Northeast Philly. I grew up a few blocks away from here, and I know this area very, very well. And in 1996, it was actually in early March, on a Friday night around 6 p.m., which is eerily similar to what happened last Friday. A plane crashed onto Levick Street into a row home. And so this is not the first time this has happened in this neighborhood. And I posted something on social media tagging all my old neighbors, like, hey, do you remember this crash? And I actually was able to find the Inquirer archives detailing the crash. And the big difference is that plane did not erupt into a fireball or explosion. And the pilot was the only person on board. He survived. But the plane was sticking out of the home. And I remember hundreds and hundreds of people came from all over the neighborhood to see that. So, of course, growing up as a teenager in Northeast Philly, I remember that. And this really, really triggered that memory. And so, again, even though this was a much more tragic and catastrophic event, again, it begs the question, what is happening with these planes and with these crashes? I think it's a concern a lot of people have, given the lack of air flight or traffic controllers and the other crash that happened in Washington. And a lot of people are frankly scared to fly. And so I think we're eagerly awaiting the results of both of those investigations and reassurance from the FAA that these crashes are rare and that people don't have anything to worry about. But for right now, people are still really scared and concerned. And certainly this event has had a really deep impact on the residents of this neighborhood and anybody that's been working here in this business corridor.
All right. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for reporting on that. There's still a lot to learn, a lot more to see what's going on there, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. We'd like to bring in Lance Haver now.
Hi, good evening.
Lance, how are you tonight?
All right, I want to thank Vanessa for being out there to report. It's not exactly a warm evening, so I really appreciate her being out there. I am doing well, and I want to talk a little bit about what Trump is actually doing and what effect it will have on consumers. So I attended the demonstration in front of Senator Fetterman's office. It was unique in that there was no loudspeaker system. It seemed somewhat spontaneous. There were roughly 400 people there. No one was circulating petitions. No one was collecting names. There didn't seem to be any real person in charge. Fair amount of chanting. But I think the most interesting part was people were incredulous. They didn't believe it. From we're going to invade Palestine and turn it into the Riviera, to we're going to send people into Mexico, to we're going to steal Greenland and Mexico, and we're going to make Canada the 51st state. We're going to have tariffs. No, we're not. Yes, we are. No, we're not. Well, only for this reason. We're using a negotiation tactic, but no, we're really doing it to create jobs. People were somewhat incredulous about all the turmoil that President Trump has created, making orders that clearly hadn't been thought out, couldn't be implemented. And so one of the things I wanted to call attention to is what else is happening as we all are being overwhelmed with what appears to be craziness, to write an order that can't be followed, to put somebody in charge who is closing down offices and closing down departments who doesn't have the authority to do it, to an executive order that overturns the Constitution. All these things are clearly illegal. The courts are clearly going to stop them. So why is he doing it? What's the advantage? Now, there is the argument that, of course, he is vain or crazy or doesn't know what he's doing or doesn't have an understanding of government. The other thing is he's really P.T. Barnum. The famous quote from P.T. Barnum is, "There's a sucker born every minute." And you put on a show like a magician who has a sleight of hand and gets people to look one way and then does something else. So I want to call our viewers' attention to what I wrote about this week, and that is what's happening to the regulatory bodies, where the president, whoever he is, does have the right to appoint the commissioners, does have the right to appoint the chairman. So if I could call up the first slide, thank you. So the Federal Trade Commission is the older of the two that I'm going to talk about. And the Federal Trade Commission is supposed to protect consumers from the abuses of monopoly power, supposed to regulate mergers, supposed to make rules so that if a business wants to buy another business, they can't have too much of the market share. Classical economics says if a business has a tremendous amount of the market share, they'll abuse consumers and they'll abuse the workers. So we had a woman who was the chair who was very aggressively challenging mergers, very aggressively challenging corporate dominance and corporate control. One of the first things President Trump did while he was talking about immigrants and making ridiculous statements is he fired her. And he decided to appoint, as the chair, a former clerk for Clarence Thomas, the man who took vacations, didn't tell anyone about it. It's been bought and paid for by many people over the years. And what does that mean? Well, here's a headline from the lawyers who represent corporate America. The commissioners signaled changes to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, enforcement of employee no hire restrictions under the Trump-Vance administration. So the former chair of the FTC was trying to stop these no-compete clauses. What that meant is if you worked for a company, the company could stop you from seeking a job in a similar industry. If you had worked in some form of transportation for one airlines, the clause would have stopped you from being able to get a job in another airlines. They were getting ready to, the Federal Trade Commission was getting ready to overturn those clauses. And now what we see is the change is giving the corporations everything that they wanted in terms of overturning the Federal Trade Commission decisions that they didn't like over the last 4 years. And it's not just the Federal Trade Commission. If we could skip to the next slide, please. Perhaps I can do that, but thank you. So this is the new chair. And the new chair is Andrew Ferguson, as I mentioned. He is a former clerk for Clarence Thomas. And he is saying that they are clearly going to overturn all of these decisions in the past. It's not a question of would they or would they not. The question is, when are they going to do it? Now, the significance of this, again, is there are elements inside of the Trump supporters who are anti-monopolists, including Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon didn't want the former commissioner to be let go. They want to break up the banks. They want to break up the Silicon Valley businesses. They want to have smaller businesses and more competition. So corporate America, who invested in Trump, is now getting their reward or their dividend or their, but they invested getting that money back through these changes. The other agency that protects consumers from corporate abuses is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And this is the one that says If you want to cancel a contract, the company has to let you cancel. Companies can't find ways of redlining against people of color. Now, no business actually goes out and says, we're not going to give African Americans or Latinos mortgages. Instead, what they do is come up with interesting ways of having the same effect. The best example is they're not going to write a mortgage for any house that has a flat roof, or they're not going to write a mortgage for any house that's connected to another house. Now, when you say that, it looks pretty clearly like that's not discriminating on the basis of race. But when you see what the effect of that is, it very clearly does that. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been protecting consumers against that, has been very aggressive in making sure, for example, that the credit reporting agencies, when you say they made a mistake on my credit history, they actually do something about it. And a clear example of this, again, is unfortunately, your credit score affects how much you pay, not just for loans, not just for a mortgage, but also how much you pay for car insurance and homeowners insurance. So when you go ahead and have these mistakes on the credit report and they're not removed, the businesses that pay the credit reporting businesses for this information benefit. And it's kind of this sweetheart deal where the credit reporting businesses, I shouldn't call them agencies because that has a suggestion it's got something to do with government or has something to do with public policy. There is no government involvement. The credit reporting businesses are private businesses in business to make as much money as they possibly can. The people who pay for those reports are other businesses. So it's kind of a hand in glove agreement. The business doesn't want the mistakes corrected because if people's credit score goes down, what ends up happening, of course, is they get lower prices. So it's in the interest of the financial community and the insurance companies to not have these mistakes corrected. So what is Trump doing while he's talking about all this craziness? Well, he fires the aggressive head who used to work with Senator Warren, who created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, fires that person and brings in somebody else. And who does he bring in? He brings in a hedge fund manager. And this hedge fund manager has never represented consumers, has never worked with consumers, has never played any role in our society to defend consumers' interests. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with people who make a lot of money, but I am suggesting the situation in which you find yourself shapes your thinking. And if you're a hedge fund manager and you don't hear firsthand about how consumers have trouble getting out of contracts, how they have trouble getting their credit reports corrected, you don't know anything about that. You're a hedge fund manager, and what you hear is businesses complaining about the rules and regulations. And so what they're saying is they're now going to go back for at least 6 months and redo all of the rules and regulations the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, put into effect. And the result of that is the click to cancel, the rule that says if you got the contract by clicking, you have to be able to get out of the contract by clicking. And I just want to give a clear example of that. Many of us have been pitched by these insurance programs that say they'll insure all the appliances in our house. And so if you sign up for one of them, it sounds like a good deal. And maybe it is for some people, but for other people it isn't. Let's say you have a claim and for whatever reason, the insurance company can't get your appliance fixed. Well, you're going to try and cancel that insurance policy, and you'll find out it's almost impossible to do so. Sometimes it's so bad that the only way to get out of that contract is to actually cancel the credit card. And then the company still tries to do it. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been putting limits on that, and those limits are all going to be changed. And the director is, again, this man called Scott Bessent, and he's the acting director. But he's also the Secretary of the Treasury. So he is somebody whose orientation is towards big business, towards banks, and going ahead and helping corporations make more money. And there is no question, as I speak today, of what direction they're going in. they have already told their lawyers that they are not to try and defend in court any challenge by any corporation to the rules and regulations that have been in place. Now, I know a lot of us think this is only happening on the national level, that this is something that Trump is doing by himself. And I just want to point out that that would be an incorrect analysis, because what we're seeing, again, whether it's purposeful or it's inadvertent, what we're seeing is with all the craziness that's going on, with all the hard things it is to understand, we're seeing the business community take advantage of that. And the business community took advantage of that in the last Trump administration by getting all the tax breaks. Now they're doing it through deregulating everything. And because Trump learned the last time that there were people in government who actually believed in government, he's replacing all of them with people who believe in President Trump and don't believe in government. So traditionally, and I'm somebody who has worked in government, the traditional role for government bureaucrats is to say, I work for the people, and the elected official gets to decide whether I'm doing a good job or a bad job. If I want to work for the elected official, I'd work in the campaign, but I don't want to work for the elected official. I want to serve the public. And yes, I can be fired if the person who appointed me doesn't like what I'm doing, but I don't work for the person who appointed me. President Trump has inverted that, and he has said now everybody has to work for him. It's so bad. Just as a concrete example, Bobby Kennedy Jr., who says we shouldn't eat junk food, was forced on a campaign plane to be photographed eating junk food with President Trump. And all the things, again, whether you liked Bobby Kennedy Jr. or you didn't, all the things he has been saying about vaccines, he has renounced. Every single one of his beliefs, he has now renounced. And that is the price to serve the President Trump and not serve the public. And that is who he's put in business. Now, again, it'd be nice to say that this is unique to the federal government, but it's not. It's a tactic that the business community has learned really well. And the example here in Pennsylvania is the new Attorney General, who's a Republican, has forced the resignation of Pennsylvania's consumer advocate. Now, the consumer advocate represents consumers in utility matters before the Public Utility Commission here in Pennsylvania. And the primary problem from the business point of view is the former consumer advocate was opposed to water utility privatization. Now, those of us who follow this issue know that what ends up happening is when the water utility is sold to a private company, for 2 years, rates stay the same because there's a promise no rate increase for 2 years. And after that, they go up as much as double. So that's one of the things that's happening. And I'm not one of those people who is going to say that what President Trump is doing has no rhyme or reason to it. What I'm saying is what was famous during the Watergate hearings and during the Watergate investigation, follow the money. Who's benefiting? Yes, we are losing. Our people are at risk. We're at risk of losing benefits. Immigrants are at risk of being removed. All of those things are true. Those are real significant losses. But there are people who are winning. And those are the corporations who are getting all the rules and regulations thrown out, while the rest of us are horrified by all of the noise that the presidency is creating.
And Lance, one of the things that really stuck out to me regarding Senator Fetterman, he voted to approve Pam Bondi as Attorney General, who spread misinformation about Pennsylvania.
And if had been elected, had been successful, Senator Fetterman wouldn't be Senator Fetterman.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot understand what he's doing. I do not. I'm not going to get too far into this. It's infuriating. But the Democratic Party's response to this has been, I'll just call it what it is, non-existent. It's almost like they don't know what to do.
Well, again, that may be true, but I don't think that these people are ignorant, and I don't think that they're dumb. I think the problem is where they get their money. they go to the same well that the Republican Party goes to. And the
Yeah.
corporations that are winning are not unhappy. And, you know, they may be, the meat packing companies may be unhappy when there's no one there to work in those plants. Farmers may be unhappy when there's no laborers to help bring in the crops. But the corporate 100, the top 100 companies in America, they're not unhappy about any of this.
Right.
The threats of the tariffs gone overnight.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week on Hall Monitor.